All right. Well, in that case, I guess I'm going to get this thing started. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Contract Community Call, Contract Standards Community Call number 2. My name is Max. I am a DevHub community contributor, and I'm here to kick us off today to do a follow-up on the multi-token discussion for Community Call number 1. Move up the slides. Some quick little stuff. So just some reminders on the format. These community group meetings, they're open. They're designed to, provide a forum to discuss questions, ideas, and concerns related to near contract standards, help shape ideas and proposals. This is a free format discussion. I want people to feel free to chime in at any moment, preferably not too disruptive, but more or less anything goes beyond that. Everyone, please introduce yourself on the chat if you'd be so kind, so we can move things forward in the interest of time. And my role will just be to take notes and ensure decorum. And we will post this recording and summary on Twitter and on YouTube shortly after this call. So the agenda today is just the multi-token discussion follow-up. We had a very lively discussion last time. People, for the most part, seem to want to move things along for NEP 245 and see about getting comments and concerns on GitHub so that we can actually get that voted on. Hopefully some form of it implemented at some point soon, but we'll see how the discussion takes us today. I think Sean wanted to kick us off with a quick introduction. So Sean, if you'd be so kind, I'll just pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Maxwell. I just want to start by thanking everyone from the contract standard community, as well as the wallets and indexers in attendance for taking the time. My name is Sean Bender from Tenament. We've been working internally on developing a version of the multi-token for our own business use case since mid-2022, and kind of have been in discussion the last 6 to 8 weeks with the ecosystem to see what a multi-token standard should look like that meets all near stakeholders. So obviously, the input from wallets and indexers is paramount to ecosystem-wide adoption, and that's like the main purpose of the call today. So I think the CTA from the Tenament side is to have Uncle Tony and Alex from our team post a reference implementation for the NEP 245 on the near NEP proposal board for the Gig Hub by Monday. I think if we take the discussion for comments and responses over the next week there, potentially could get handed off to the contract working group or the wallet working group for review. And then once all comments are resolved, potentially a vote. So I'll throw it to our CTO, Alex, now for a synopsis of what our viewpoint is and what we've discussed with the community. And if anyone wants to raise a hand or chime in, we can go from there. So Alex?
Hello, everyone. Super nice to see people here from different stakeholders. Vlad, nice to see you here as well. Max, Ori. Yeah, so there were a couple of ideas, discussions around what parts of the protocol should be optional and mandatory. And I think we will probably, at least we think we should go into making everything that makes sense to be optional, even if for some use cases it might, it needs to have a value. So I'm kind of on the side, okay, let's make it more flexible to just remove any barrier for entries for everyone, and we can later on just, enforce things as needed. Again, I think most important is for people just to see that this standard fits their needs, because that was the main reason why we started this initiative. We wanted the standard and the reference implementation that would be good enough to get started with and then build on top of. And we found the multi-token standard being the closest thing, but it was not right. It was not a standard fully adopted, and it had an incomplete reference implementation. We want this to not be the case anymore. For new people coming into the ecosystem, so that's kind of our goal here. We want to have something that works as a foundation for everyone to build on. And hence the reason why we try to get all the stakeholders in these meetings before we get it finalized and approved.
That's cool. Is there any link that we can?
Yeah, we have 1 second. Let me try to find it. We have the reference right here. GitHub. One sec. Let me just find the link and I'll drop it in the chat.
I missed the last call, so I'm not fully up to speed with like what was discussed, to be honest. But I wanted to ask whether it's if you already tried to run it in production, have you had a chance to like run it through the like real use cases, or you're still like you're approaching it from the NAP point of view first, and then
Yeah, we're running it on our product. It's fully functional MVP. We initially started with just an NFT standard implementation because we wanted to have interoperability with the wallet. Like that was one of the requirements that we thought would be necessary for the MVP. And then we migrated it to the multi-token standard. So we have that one we're running in production.
And so last time, just while Alex is finding those links and putting them in the chat. So, last time we had, discussed this standard from a variety of perspectives. We had invited wallet stakeholders to join us today. I don't know if is anybody here from a wallet builder perspective at all? No. Okay. So we have invited them to join the call. Unfortunately, none of them have, actually registered, or maybe they registered, maybe they didn't, maybe they're not here. But, from the conversations, the brief conversations that we've had with them, they've all, they have said that, if it is, a standard is approved, then without a doubt, they will provide the support for it. So, I think that was a, very simple yet solid answer from their perspective. Of course, maybe different wallet builders have different perspectives. That was from, I think, Peter. I think he's from Here Wallet. And so, from my perspective, like if we are able to approve it and get it standardized and everything is, we can address any issues or changes that need to happen, then the wallet builders, they are keen on adopting it, so and ready to do so as long as it's standardized. So I don't think that poses a major issue or a road bump in any sense of the in any way. So that's just the touching up on not last week, 2 weeks ago, where we are regarding that stuff.
I see. Yeah, that's unfortunate that we don't have the representatives to discuss, because otherwise it seems a bit pointless. I know. Maxwell, sorry I cut you off.
No, I just saw that Lachlan was on the call and wondered if he had, you brought up some concerns last time that maybe you wanted to recap for this meeting, and maybe discuss whether or not you changed your mind or whether you will take the same general perspective.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, there's a big plane or something going by at the moment. Yeah, look, I just felt like we needed representation from the projects, specifically wallets and indexers. I mean, we can speak also on the indexer side, but I felt like there wasn't enough participation by the projects that would actually be essentially required to implement the standard on the receiving end. And questions about how these tokens are designed, I think should be considered from the point of view of that end of the implementation, really. If, for instance, if a wallet wants to display semi-fungible tokens, do they think it makes more sense for them to be designed from the perspective of fungible tokens that contain maybe some extra metadata properties, et cetera, or maybe some kind of extension on a fungible token standard? Or does it make more sense for them to come from the NFT perspective with kind of fungible elements? Because I think that's that's one thing that like I don't want to sound like a broken record, and like at a certain point I promise I'll shut up. But but I just think that like it seems to me that that semi-fungible tokens, so firstly, semi-fungible tokens are the use case that makes this multi-token standard necessary. In my opinion, and so if I'm wrong, like someone can correct me, but we have a standard for fungible tokens. We have a standard for non-fungible tokens. There are semi-fungible tokens, which is why bridges like XP Network reached out to us at few and far and said, hey, what's the deal with the multi-token standard? What can we do to improve this? Because we have no way to represent semi-fungible tokens on Near. We have fungible tokens covered, we have non-fungible tokens, but not semi-fungible tokens. Yes, there's also the question of like, if people want to just straight up like bridge over, like essentially have an ERC 1155 equivalent on Near, that's another question. I would argue that we don't need to necessarily have an ERC 1155 equivalent on Near because we already have our own ecosystem and our own standards. And the way we should probably think about this is, rather than copying what exists on another chain that operates on an entirely different technical model and has an entirely different community, we should probably think about what is missing that is preventing us from implementing something in our community and on our tech, on our tech, and then think about like how we can best fill in those blanks, which would make it the most backwards compatible and the least kind of obtrusive, and to implement, because ultimately, like, there's no point of a standard that doesn't gain broad adoption. So my concern is that if those aren't really considered, if those basic design questions aren't considered, and it creates a standard that is a lot of work or considered by the key projects that would need to implement it as like a ton of work to implement, and not particularly backwards compatible, and adds duplication, for instance, like, fragmentation of NFTs and fungible tokens, which this would create, then it just is risky, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, I just want to like kind of express my concerns, and if other people don't share those concerns, then I will recognize that. And if other people share them or have other concerns, I would encourage them to kind of voice them, because I think now is the time to do that. And my key concern kind of just being that if a multi-token contract standard is implemented, essentially that multi-token contract would contain various kinds of tokens, including fungible tokens, what we consider to be tokens that have the attributes of fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens, but they would not be within the fungible token or non-fungible token standard, because they would be within the multi-token standard. So it makes it very difficult, I think, although maybe I'm wrong, and people can explain, give examples of how this would be, for instance, indexed. It makes it difficult it puts a lot of onus on indexers to make decisions on what kinds of tokens something is and what something should be represented as, that in my opinion should probably not be made by the indexes and should be given by the contract, utilizing existing standards in most cases. So that's kind of just like where my concerns lie. And again, if no one shares them, then that's totally fine.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hey, Marco.
Okay.
Hey, Marco, we
Yeah.
can
I
hear
hear
you.
you loud and clear.
Nice to meeting you guys. I have a little concerns about the standards. It's like because maybe wallet can tell a token is is a non-fungible token or fungible token through the name of the interface. But for this standard MFT standards, if we assume we have a contract that it has both fungible token and non-fungible token, is there any way to tell for a specific token ID that to tell is it a non-fungible token or fungible token? Because something like wallet will treat it in a very different way for fungible token and the non-fungible token. So for the current standards, I don't see a specific interface to do that work, to distinguish the fungible token and non-fungible token. That's one concern. And another concern is I just putting the message that for the token structure, I want it to be neat as much as possible. So that's two concerns from my perspective. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can probably answer this one the way I see it. By definition, a non-fungible token is a token that has a total supply of 1 per token ID and has 0 decimals in the token mass. Like that's kind of the definition on fungible one. A total supply of 1 and no decimals. There are also these semi-fungible tokens, which have a small supply and are usually non-divisible. Like for instance, they could have a total mass of 100. And again, there would be no decimals. So they would be essentially semi-fungible because you cannot subdivide it. You just can buy 1 off, 2, or up to n. And that would be probably the closest implementation to what 1155 is used most of the time nowadays. It's for this 1 of n kind of NFTs. And in my opinion, that's what makes sense because you don't need to add additional metadata in manifest to describe this. You just look at the total of the token supply, and if it's a supply of 1, well, you know it's a non-fungible. But
yeah, makes sense.
To make it more obvious, we can definitely add some metadata on how stuff should be displayed. I'm not sure if that should be included in this spec, or that's probably, or maybe that's something to discuss in separate specs, a spec about how to display traits and various metadata information in wallets, and how to deal with token families and groups of tokens and loot and so on. And like there is a lot of edge cases here on how to best display a token for a certain use case across the ecosystem. But I think at a higher level, it's probably the token supply and then the metadata, which should define how a token should be handled and then displayed. I think there's 2 things: one handling, the second one displaying.
Yeah. The point here is like I know there will be different ways to tell the distinguish from the standards by different project. Could we make it something like a standard to tell the developer that if the decimal is none, is a null, or decimal is 0, it means it's a non-fungible token. If we can make it a standard, maybe it will be good for all the developers.
Yeah, I mean, I might be biased here. I'm kind of a purist in believing that one standard will not be the universal solution, and we want redundancy in standards as well. That is, we already have an NFT standard which does pretty well for its specific use case of transferable, non-fungible, 1-of-1 tokens, right? And that's what I would use. If I want to just create a 1-of-1 drop, I would just use an NFT, not an empty standard. And if I want to do a utility token that has a standard use case, like for instance, a DAO token, right? I would probably use an empty, I would use the FT standards for that. Now, if I want to use a fungible token for my farm, which can accept a multitude of tokens for my liquidity pool, which can accept multiple different tokens inside the pool, then here I would not use the fungible. I would not use the empty standard. Here I would use the empty standard.
Yeah.
So I think all 3 standards should exist, and maybe there'll be more standards that should exist in the future. And while MT is a superset that would allow people to have purely non-fungible or purely fungible tokens. I don't think, in my opinion, that should not be the goal. The goal should be just to have a standard that allows these advanced use cases without sacrificing functionality and with minimal complexity. But for more simple use cases, I don't see why we would not just continue supporting the non-standard. Again, that's my personal opinion. Maybe the consensus would be different. And we're definitely open to include more of these guidelines in the standard itself. Like if you guys think we should include guidelines on metadata and on supply and on transferability in allowances, and even an extensions for things like royalty and payouts and payout delegation, like fee delegation, like sure, we can include that in the standard. I believe these are just use cases, which so they might be part of the standard, might be standard extensions. But I personally just go with what the community consensus believes is makes more sense right now to be included in the standard. So to also address the first question we got, the first concern we got, is that yes, we want backward compatibility, but not if that means that the multi-token standard will not allow this flexibility. Right? I think the most important thing is to allow flexibility going forward, and then, if possible, have some backward compatibility for people who maybe want to just have a standard across their product range and not deal with NFTs and FTs. But I don't think that should be a primary goal, in my opinion. Again, up for discussion. And I think this position has been it's been our position for most of the time, that we want to understand that respond to this use cases which are not well covered by NFTs and FTs first of all. And then if we can get additional things in the standard, sure, we'll try to do our best. Amount of duplication between MT standards and FT, yes, that's probably one of the main things that's like brought up. Like, yes, there is some duplication. I don't know how we can get rid of the duplication, but I don't think it's necessarily bad.
Yeah, I mean, the concern it just raises to me is that if you do have something that's two things that are 95% the same, which this really is currently, maybe, and one is not replacing the other, and they both then need to be kind of maintained, and they're both going to essentially implement like 95% of their logic is going to be identical, and their interfaces, etc. That just for me is a little bit of a potential warning sign that maybe they are not actually such separate things. And
we can look at the amount of lines of code that are duplicated or not. I think the overlap with NFT is closer to 50% in terms of code, but in terms of the manifest itself, yeah, there's a lot closer to 90%, because the manifest is something that's very, very relevant for NFTs and for MTs, and not something that's used much for the fungible tokens. So in terms of the manifest and things like royalties and yes, the overlap is like close to 100%. There is also overlap with fungible tokens, for instance, in terms of allowances and on terms like token supply. Like the overlap is pretty big there. So it just happens that the NFT is technically more complex, so it's more lines of code and has more overlap.
Well, from my experience, from what I was observing of I also thought that MT is just a small extension, but ultimately there are actually quite a few places in the interface where it's much more complex than just FT or just NFT. So I view it as more multiplication of the complication rather than just addition. So if we're speaking about combining FT and NFT in the same contract, this only means that you can have one like some of the items that are not countable, and others that are like and the only one like talking and it's only one that you can have as a fungible have a fungible interface. When you combine it together, it's more features there. There are more things in terms of security and how to revert those changes. What to do if like one token can be reverted, another cannot be because there is like already it's already spent. So all those rollbacks are getting more and more complicated. And from the events point of view, you also need to account for those. So it becomes bigger payload here and there. So from what I've seen so far, it is, and it's not clear indeed how to display it properly on the wallet side. So I think there will be different applications for multi tokens, and this will be informing us as we go. So I would suggest that the interfaces are like defined, and then I imagine there will be an extensions added with guidelines, with like maybe some hints of, is it a DEX like standard, or is it a game with where gold, silver, and something else going on? So
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Most probably we would want in the long term to have probably functionality and displaying kind of slightly decoupled, and most probably just properly displaying multi-token would be a bit more complicated than just showing a bunch of cards on the NFT side of the wallet. I personally would want to see them more like an order book DEX kind of thing, like a table where you can have the graphic representation of the token, but also some details, right? That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense for multi-tokens that are things like that have both a supply and a manifest, like for instance, collectible items in a game. Or it might make sense for things that are, for example, staked coin receipts or liquidity pool receipts, right? Because those have amounts, but they also have certain attributes, like it can be an interest-bearing asset, it can have a liquidation date, it can have a bunch of things which are relevant for that particular multi-token and not relevant for other instances of the same multi-token. So in terms of UI, it's probably something that something like I think needs additional discussion if we want to have a really, really feature-proof UI. But I also don't realistically expect for the UI stuff to be a one-step process. It's probably gonna be an iterative process in which we'll just maybe develop it over time as we find new usages. But I agree here with Vlad that what's currently being used in 1155 displaying essentially 1155 just as a slightly more advanced NFT is probably not enough in the long term. But in the short term, that's still better than nothing. Right? It's still at least allows some functionality there that would not be possible with just NFTs. Because to display the NFTs in this case, you essentially just have, if you're owning, let's say, 5 cards in a game of a certain type, a certain multi-token, or a certain amount of coins that's stacked somewhere. Right now, you either don't show it in the wallet at all, or you just show as 5 items, which is not ideal. Right, it's just not ideal. So anyways, that I think just having any kind of implementation of this and any kind of consensus for the wallet is better than what we currently have. Like the consensus right now is just people are using either fungible tokens or NFTs for these use cases, and a lot of times they don't even show up in the wallets at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it'll definitely be an iterative process on the UX, UI side. I personally, do see it from a collectibles point of view, and kind of categorized as that, but with a extra, when you click into your collectible, like if you think about My Near Wallet, right? You click into that collectible, you would have that additional data underneath once you click into it, right? And that's how I would see it displayed, but it really depends on, I could see it from other perspectives as well, where it is, closer to a more fungible type asset anyways. I just want to talk about the overlap and the need for the token in general, and the standard in general. It has, I hear what you're saying, when people, Lachlan, when you're basically saying that, we don't need to have an 1155 equivalent. We have our own community, we have our own ecosystem. I will say that, in conversations, just around Austin and consensus, when talking to people actually, that is a sticking point with people, coming to Near and building on Near, is that there is no 1155 equivalent. And I'm not saying it has to be the exact same as 1155, but what I will say is that people are looking for that functionality. And, and you can see that directly with the people that are, building on Near right now, right? But between Tendermint, Open Forest Protocol, what was it? The Kenny, I think he's building Ample is the name. And there are some other examples as well that are all using some, or have some need for this. And so if that's, just a small subset of, a relatively, small Near community that are active in these calls and, saying that we need these standards, then I do think that, it's illustrative enough of a need here. And that's why we do want to move this along to, to build it, right? And to get things to a place where they can be standardized. And, we will absolutely continue to hear other perspectives, but I think it is important to explore and kind of build this out for that reason, for not only the current need, but also the growth of the ecosystem overall in the long term. Because sure, Near has a great ecosystem, but it would be great to see it 10 times bigger with 10 times more projects and 100 times more users, right?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I agree. I think building out the kind of guidelines of how the contracts and tokens and events, et cetera, should be interpreted will be very helpful, because that's kind of what I'm worried about is interpreters, which are probably mostly going to be indexers, kind of not having a standardized way to go about that, and then kind of being interpreted in different ways, and then we end up with this, potentially kind of mixed up state and understanding of what they are and how they should be interpreted. So yeah, I think just adding that would be helpful, so that yeah, people who are going to be implementing it, primarily indexers, can understand how they're going to be implementing it and kind of be informed. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. It's unfortunate that we didn't get any representation from that perspective here on this call today. But I think, what we can do is, maybe it's a time, maybe it's, no one wants to, give up 30 minutes of their busy day to, for this. But I do think that we can probably get some feedback directly on the proposal from, wallet perspective, indexer perspective, instead of maybe on these calls. And I think that could probably go a long way in just making sure that, like, it does actually, work for those other stakeholders that aren't here for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, for sure. We also run an indexer, so we can give feedback on that side also.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
One of the things a lot of people have expressed, especially with these, are like it's kind of hard to keep track, or if someone can go and like give a synopsis of like the current reference implementation and just so we can see kind of the complications and like maybe concerns that Vlad have. I know you've been commenting with Uncle Tony in the past and kind of where it was left off on here.
So overall, I think the complication was around approval standardization, because approval management still does not exist for fungible tokens. Seemed like unnecessarily complex area that like nobody would pick up in the ecosystem. So with approval management, there were a lot of questions in terms of just input arguments and output values, what to expect, and also on the callbacks, whether to include just tokens in order, just basically expect that the list is matching the original order of the input arguments, or should it be a more complex object with key values. So there are like more of the just concerns about the size of the payload and complication for the implementers to keep track of things and make sure that like when you submit something, you don't risk that the values will be misinterpreted either on the receiving side or in the return value. So those were probably the main ones, but the implementation was left. I would say like it was almost there, but there were things that just required more attention and again discussion around the like naming conventions and stuff. The multi-token events were just for the context, they were initially started as like, let's do NFT events, but then my team, which was working on the indexing the network on Pagoda side, was clearly not happy about the like mix of two different standards colliding on the naming. So we quickly like requested the changes, and from the events point of view, they absolutely must be like have different naming, because they are very different like from the structure point of view. Yeah, that is the context basically. From what I know, Uncle Tony wouldn't be able to proceed with this pull request, so whoever have the capacity needs to pick it up. I was trying to keep him in the ecosystem, but he moved on already to his own startup, so he's busy with the stuff. So that is a piece of context probably you folks didn't know.
And then going off what Marco said, he was mentioning being able to label this like and I think NEP 351 was passed. So can you give some context on that and how this could be used to label contracts before a standard is passed? Or
sorry, I didn't catch it. Can you say it again?
I think Marco was asking something that could be relevant to NEP 351, the contract source metadata that was passed like a few months ago. Could you kind of like outline that and how that can be used to label contracts that haven't been standardized yet for some context? Or
do you mean the last comment? Because I don't see any references to. So just for the context, NEPS 330 is about basically providing the metadata about the contract itself. So it's name, version, and supported standards. So it's very bare bones, but hopefully will be very helpful for the ecosystem in general. So this is the way how the clients could easily derive information about the contract without just lurking and trying and failing executing certain methods. So it will be just one method on the contract that would you would call it as a view function and receive a list of supported, or assume like they want to support those standards. So it's you can guarantee, but they can claim that they support them at least. And this is the way we can distinguish standards after all. But it's not widely adopted in the ecosystem right now, so that's why it's important to still keep the method names unique. And I actually like the ERC 1155 naming conventions around the callbacks, which actually they call them on ERC 1155 received. So actually that would be very helpful for the ecosystem to adopt, I guess, but I think it's a different discussion. Yeah, that's all from my side,
Yeah, and real quickly, Bud, I understand your concerns. Uncle Tony actually has the bandwidth once we've figured out what a consensus might be to go forward with development. And he can work on an async. He just doesn't have time during the day for the meetings. So I think the biggest CTA for myself would be get on a call with Uncle Tony and Alex, look at what we've seen from the Replit implementation from the community and from Lachlan, as well as your concerns, and maybe make a post on the NEP near gig board proposal board for anyone to comment. And Alex and Uncle Tony can go back and forth if there's anyone from the wall perspective or indexer's perspective. If we can come to a consensus on what needs to be built, Uncle Tony and Alex, as well as other people from the Tendermint team, can get this to the finish line. It's just a matter of the last 6 weeks going back and forth and seeing what actually needs to be done, what are the concerns, and maybe would you recommend that bringing it to that NEP proposal board and looking for comment and resolving comments, and then maybe you can get to a contract working group and a wallet working group, and then Uncle Tony and Alex and other people can take it to the finish line. It's just the back and forth that Uncle Tony doesn't have time for right now.
I see. Well, I'm all for having like concrete specific items to work on. I'm not actively building anything with multiple MT, so I was always advocating for you folks who actually have the experience to to inform the standards team that these are the concerns, this is the limitations or security flaws in it. Like it seems like the approval management was at flaw in the original standard. I remember this comment from Uncle Tony where he basically outlined various issues he fixed along the way. Basically, just that there is a misalignment between the standard now and this reference implementation, which needs to be backported into the standard.
No, I completely agree. And Alex, from that standpoint, do you think if we had a sync with Uncle Tony, posted the reference implementation and monitor comments, or what do you see as next steps? And would that fulfill your concerns, Lachlan, and getting the input from not just the contract community, but also from the wallets and indexers on that GitHub?
Well, from my perspective is we probably you want to have the specs updated in the on the documentation side, because right now it still says that it's work in progress. So we can kind of have a finalized version 1 or 0.1 that we can say, hey, it's not a draft anymore. We actually have a working proposal here, and address any of these concerns. There's still any remaining, and then we can move to see how we can evolve the standard going forward. So that's how I see it. Just kind of passing the milestone. Again, with Uncle Tony, I can work with Sonia to fix individual issues. Like the thing is that obviously we're not working full time just on this, so we want to see specific guidance from the community, what people here actually need, rather than just want for the use cases. So we can also be focused on the deliverable. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, I think we just want to have consensus. So I think there's enough consensus. Okay, this looks good enough. We need to address these 2 or 3 questions, and then we're good. Then we're gonna do that. Like what we want is consensus for now.
Sounds good to me.
It does seem to me like it would be really helpful to have some kind of asynchronous discussion or post on the gigs that we've mentioned, just so that people can, continue to hash out these concerns. We can kind of have things in a record. It does kind of seem like there is a need for some kind of standard. It seems to me, it's kind of the opinions I'm getting from this, but we need to have concrete steps to move this forward. Sorry, not fully technical, so I can't understand the entire discussion, but I just want to make sure that people are seeing things moving.
No, I agree with that. And maybe if you could send the recording so I can review it with Alex and Uncle Tony. And like I mentioned, we can get it to that gig board and then respond async moving forward. And then hopefully that addresses some of Lachlan's concerns. And we can get the feedback from not just his indexer, other indexers, and then how it's going to display in the wallets. I think that's the best way to move it forward over the next 7-14 days. If there's still a blocker, maybe there's a need for another call with representation. But I think comment and response on that gig board for the NEP will be the way to move it forward, address concerns, and then we can do it async, and that fits better with Uncle Tony's schedule, with Alex's schedule, and then we can, get a threshold and move forward. Does that sound like a plan to you, Lachlan?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, that's all from my side on the MTS. I know that took up a majority of the time. Is there the next form of business, Maxwell?
Today we were really just here to talk about the multi-token standard. We do have another 10 minutes if anybody else has things to bring up, but I think that this is probably the conclusion for now. It of course would be really helpful to start getting input from wallet builders, indexers, and those sorts, because it does seem that to be like that those are the people who are missing from these calls, and it would be very helpful to know if there are any concerns from any of those people. But for now, I think moving this to an async discussion makes the most sense to me.
Okay, and if, over the next day or two, once you have the recording, if you could send that to me, I kind of want to sync with Uncle Tony on Saturday to try to get something up by Monday, and then async will be everyone's time is mindful.
Of course, and we will be posting this recording to YouTube. I'm about to jump on a 13-hour flight, so I can't promise it'll be in the next 24 hours, but within the next 48, I'll be trying to get that up, and I'll post it in the Telegram group as soon as it is. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you very much, and have a great flight.
Sean?
Yeah, I got some like unrelated questions, but in terms of like just contracts in general, is there a Sputnik V4 by chance? Like, is there anybody that's like dedicated towards like upgrading the contracts, or is that something that the community would need to like do? Or like, Vlad, do you have any insight on that by chance? I've been wondering.
No, I mean, I only heard about Sputnik V4 as a reference to like next gen with no concrete timelines. So I don't know anything about it. But I'll like in general, just as a rule of thumb, if anybody needs it, feel free to pick it up and like add the features you need and pitch it to the community. And like that's where we meet and where we discuss things. Not everything needs to be standardized. That's also important thing. Like Sputnik DAO is still not standardized. There was an attempt to standardize the interfaces, but it's so big, and the attempt wasn't very fruitful, to be honest. It was very like early on with no specific method name, like meat to it basically, and that actually brings us to the table that, well, we kind of need the standard in the future, but so far we can with one reference implementation we can continue in this way. With fungible tokens, with NFT, with MT, it's more urgent for sure, because there are plenty of different players in the space, and there are plenty of different clients, and this mix is impossible to maintain without a standard. With Sputnik DAO, one contract, so far we can live with it for a while.
And then also I had some questions about like just Pagoda like timeline. I saw some stuff about like account extensions and multi-contract accounts. Do you have any like kind of foresight on like when that would be implemented, or yeah, and like what that means for like people who are like, you know, developing factory contracts or things like that?
I cannot comment on that, to be honest, but I only have very high level knowledge about it. All you can find in the NAPs, and I believe there is a public roadmap of Pagoda where at least this sync contract, sync accounts or account extensions, that's how they call it. It's on the roadmap, so you can look it up, but I don't have it from the top of my head. I don't remember what was the plan there. I believe it's on the protocol roadmap, so that was very detailed, I believe, in the terms of timelines.
Yeah, I saw it there, and it was kind of a teaser. I haven't been able to get any answers on like what that means. And also, like you mentioned, like 351 not being widely adopted, and then also like but being passed. Are there any other like NEPs that have been passed that need to be adopted, and like how can the community, like what should the community like do about it? Like if you can.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we will need to do a better job of communicating and keeping it up to date in the, I don't know, like probably we'll need to revisit the NEPs README file with a table, not only referencing the NEPs, but also referencing the implementation of the NEPs. That will probably help us to be on the same page and understand what are the missing gaps here and there. So if anybody wants to champion it, that would be awesome. I'm specifically talking, like I will share the link, what I mean in the chat. So it's NEPs repo. If you scroll down, you see that there is NEP number, title, author, and status, which is not very helpful because status is always like merged essentially. If not, it just not properly updated there. So this status column is useless. We can replace it with implemented and the references to PRs or like SDK feature documentation, for example. Yeah.
Right. Well, if that's everything for today, I'll be posting the summary and the recording the next couple of days. But again, please do continue the discussion in the Telegram, and hopefully we can get the post to the DevGov board shortly so that we can get things moving along on this multi-token standard, because it does seem like this is a need that people do see as being fairly urgent. All right.
Thanks, Maxwell.
Yeah,
thanks everybody.
Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everyone's time today. Cheers.
Thank you.
Take
Take care. Bye-bye.